so now we're going to do the gram stain. We're going to be using 2 bacteria today. So what I like to do is I like to start off with just drawing what the slide would look like and labeling what the bacteria are. So for example, the first bacteria we're going to use is M. luteus, so I put an ML. And the second bacteria is going to be Staph aureus, I put SA. What I also do is I like to put my initial at the bottom. Now my initial is K for Kevin. The reason I like that is that when I label the slide, which I'm going to do right now with my China marker, is if I use the letter K, if let's say I flip the slide upside down during the processing it, I'll see that the K is upside down and I'll flip it to its proper side. So that's why I use the letter K. I would avoid the letter M, I would avoid the letter W. Use again a letter like K so that if you flip it upside down, you know it's upside down, you put it the right side. Next, I'm going to take my slide, I'm going to divide it in half just like I did before up here. I'm going to put SA at the top, and I'm going to put ML at the top. So again, when I'm done with my slide, I'm going to put it on this spot or near that spot so I have a record and I'm keeping myself clear. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sterilize my loop. Now remember, you want to wait for your loop to turn red or orangish. That means that the loop is in fact sterile. And there we go, it is sterile. I'm next going to add some water to my loop, and I'm just going to let it cool for about 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds. And then I'm going to add my drop of water. Now you'll notice that there's a pretty large drop on the end of that. If you put too large of a drop of water, we're going to be doing something called air drying. If you have too much water on the end of the loop, it's going to take forever for it to air dry, and you're just going to be watching your slide, which is not an efficient use of time. So what I like to do is just flick a little bit of water off. And remember, you can always add more water. It's very difficult to take the water off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my slide, I'm going to move it over to my staining tray, and I'm going to add a little drop of water right there on the center. And I'm going to add another drop of water for the other bacteria. Again, you don't want to add too much water. You can always add more. Once it's on, you really can't take it off. And there's another drop of water. And I'm going to sterilize my loop again. And again, wait for it to turn orangish or red. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my bacteria. So I'm going to use my first bacteria here. And remember, you want to follow proper aseptic techniques. So this is our pseudo Bunsen burner, what we call a centerator. I'm going to open up the tube, open up the slant, flame it, and I'm going to grab some bacteria. Flame it, close it, put it back in its rack, and I'm going to add a thin film of bacteria to the surface. And what I like to do is I like to go in a circle and out from the center, and there we go. I'm going to now add my second bacteria. I'm going to let this cool. I do not want to take this loop and go directly inside of the tube, because if I do, I'll end up burning the bacteria, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to wait for it to cool. Now the reason we're using a thin smear of water is because it allows light to pass through and prevents clumping of the bacteria. So again, we're going to flame the mouth of the tube, grab some bacteria, flame, cover, and again, I'm going to start from the center, making sure not to go over any spots I've done before, and there we go. Now we're going to let this air dry. Now one of the questions I get often is, how long do I have to let it air dry? You have to let it air dry for as long as it needs to be dry. So it's not dry until it's dry. I know that sounds like a ridiculous statement, but that's what it is. It has to be dry. If you're asking yourself, whether it's dry or not, I'll be happy enough to come over and look at it with you and discuss it with you. It's ultimately going to be your decision, but I want to make sure that you work on knowing when it actually is dry. The rule of thumb for me is that I have to be certain that it's air dried, okay? Because if it's not air dried, what you'll end up doing is you'll end up boiling the bacteria because of the water that's on the slide, and that'll end up causing damage to the cell. It'll rupture the cell during the application of heat, and then it'll ruin the morphology of the bacteria, which is exactly one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. So, let's say this is now air dried. If it's air dry, I now need to do what we call the heat fixing procedure. What we do is when we heat fix it, we're going to take our slide. Now, normally we would have some clothespins that would do this. Being that I'm not working with a Cinerator, I can use, being that I'm working with a Cinerator, I'm not going to use a clothespin. I just have my hands. We don't have clothespins. And what I'm going to do is, as it's air dried, I'm going to go along the surface. 1, 2, and 3. If we were using a Bunsen burner, we'd be using a special tool, like a clothespin, and going over the surface of the flame approximately 3 times. So now we've heat fixed it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a primary stain. And our primary stain is going to be crystal violet. And what I'm going to do with my crystal violet is I am going to apply it to the surface for about 1 minute. And I'm going to flood the slide. And when I say flood the slide, that means go across the entire surface. Now you'll notice that this is tilted, our rack is tilted slightly. Unfortunately, it's tilted a little bit more to the left. So what we have to do is add a gentle amount of crystal violet. We may have to add it for the full minute. So we want to keep an eye on it. We want to make sure that that does not dry out. So now we're going to wait for 1 minute. It has been on the slide for 1 minute. I'm now going to add some water. I'm going to flood it, so I'm going to tilt up like this and add some water. And you're going to see that there's purple on the bacteria. Now, crystal violet is a basic dye that penetrates through the cell wall, staining all the cells to be purple. I'm now going to add the mordant, which is Graham's iodine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the smear, and it is okay to leave the water on there, that's preferable. And what you're going to do is you're going to add some iodine to the surface. And I'm going to let it sit there for, again, 1 minute. Now this forms what we call a crystal violet iodine complex inside the cell. The complex is insoluble in water, and the larger crystal violet molecules will stay inside of the cell wall, and for those that are gram positive. For those that are gram negative, some of the crystal violet will dissipate out. Okay? So if it's gram positive, the cell wall will retain the crystal violet, the purple, because of the addition of iodine. Those that are gram negative are going to lose the majority of that purple. Some will still be retained. That's why you may still see a little bit of the violet on the after you added the crystal violet and the iodine, but most of the crystal violet will be washed off. So it's been 1 minute. I'm now going to add water. After I've done that, I'm now going to add Graham's decolorizer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add Graham's decolorizer, but I'm going to make sure I keep my water bottle close by. I'm going to add Graham's decolorizer for about 10 to 20 seconds, and I'm going to make sure it runs dry. Runs clear. As soon as it runs clear, I'm then going to apply the water, and you want to make sure you apply the water quickly. Okay. 10 seconds, let's say that's 10 seconds. I'm now going to add my water, and make sure you get that Graham's decolorizer off. Graham's decolorizer is approximately 95% alcohol. That will rip all of the crystal violet out of the slide. Okay? My next step is to add the counter stain, and the counter stain is safranin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the safranin from anywhere for about 30 to 60 seconds. My recommendation, my preference is 1 minute. So bacteria that is gram negative, now notice that it's tilted, so we want to make sure we keep adding the crystal violet. Unfortunately, this is a little bit worse than normal, so we're going to have to continually add a little bit of this saffron in. So for gram-positive bacteria, they're going to stain purple. Sometimes people refer to it as blue, which is fine. I just like purple because I say P purple, P positive. And then gram-negative, negative is red like a stop sign. Okay? Let it sit there for about 30 seconds to 1 minute. It looks pretty good. Once that's done, I'm then going to add the water. It's going to wash it off. I always like to go a little bit underneath, just a little bit. And there we go. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to add Biblis paper. So now that we have our bacteria stained and it's wet, we are going to put it in a spot where it's clear, where it's white, to make sure we can press down on the slide. Now, under no circumstances should you be holding the slide while you're pressing this down, because you can end up breaking the slide. You can end up cutting yourself. We don't want that. So again, just gently press down. You want to make sure it's dry. You're going to lift this up. It's perfectly dry, and we're good to go. Now we're ready to look under the microscope.